if you're a newer investor and you're going into a new market, I always tell my students is take the step that's directly in front of you. Newer investors get so wrapped up in this process of I need a lender and I need a contractor and I need a property inspector and I need property manager. I need all of these 19,000 things.
Cool, John. Yeah, if you want to jump in, give a quick intro, and then we can go from there. If you want to have a presentation or just like a case study, and then we can do Q&A after that.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't, at the end of the day, kind of do an introduction of myself and then obviously field any questions that you have that you might want to offer up. And we can obviously talk about a case study or so. But my name's John Blackburn. I've been investing for about 17, maybe 18 years at this point in time. So, my claim to fame is I've invested in real estate for 18 years and still have all my hair. That's pretty surprising for as stressful as it actually can be long term. But it's been an adventure, as it always is. The best part about real estate investing is there's never a dull day. And one of the things that I've done over the years is just gotten really good at evaluating properties, specifically on the rental sides. I do fix and flips, I do wholesale. That's our main bread and butter. I also have a rental property education company as well called Rental Property Pro. But my main focus over the years is as we were, growing this fix and flip and wholesale business, like most of us are doing, one of my mentors said to me, I heard him speaking from stage. I don't know if any of you know him, Than Merrill. He said the biggest regret that he ever made was that he didn't buy more rental properties, or at least he didn't hold more of the properties that, he fix and flip as rental properties long term. And, I took that to heart. So what I started to do was, instead of just analyzing the profit margin on a wholesale deal or a rehab or what have you on disposition side, I also looked at every property as a potential rental. And, not only did it add a great extra exit strategy, so ultimately we could keep more properties because usually you can pay a little bit more for rental properties, but it allowed me to build out a portfolio over time. And once you start looking at properties in that way, what you'll start to see is that a lot more properties work as rental properties where otherwise there may not have ever been a deal. You might not have been able to wholesale. You may not have ever been able to fix and flip it, but man, it works as a rental property. And we're all here to create freedom, especially financial freedom. We're using real estate as the vehicle to get there. But, if that's our actual goal, then we should be focusing on that on a day-to-day basis. And rental properties are certainly going to help us. So, I've done, I think, about 1,700 transactions in the last 17 years. So, that's kind of my experience. So I've seen a thing or two, but every day I still get surprised. And if you're new to real estate, get used to that, but it's fun. But yeah, that's about me. Any questions or anything, Sharad, anything you have for me specifically?
No, man, I will concur that the biggest regret I haven't been investing quite as long as you. I bought my first property in August 2010, and the biggest regret I have is not buying more, and so not buying more rental properties. If I could go back, I wish I bought more rental properties, especially like the price that I was paying back in 2010 through 12, 13, 14. Man, I'm like, man, if I could just go back, I would just take all my money, figure it out, and just keep buying more rental properties that I could. Yeah.
Right. That would be ideal. Hindsight is always 2020, but at the end of the day, you can't beat yourself up and, cashing a 40, 50, 100, sometimes $100,000 check on a renovation. That does feel really good. So, don't bang yourself up too bad on that, but it's definitely worth it for sure.
Yeah. It's interesting. I've not come across any investor that has said, and I bought I bought just enough rental properties. Once they get into rental properties, everybody's like, man, I wish I bought more. So yeah. I mean, do you have kind of, I'm curious, like, what's your exit with these properties? Just, if you can get a little bit more into it, that would be great.
Yeah, I think we're in a super interesting time in the world right now. I think, I've always been a thought or looked at the world as the world is working for me, not against me, right? Even when even when bad things happen, right? Or quote unquote bad things. So, the excuse I get a lot right now from other investors in regards to buying rental properties is really focused around price points and interest rates, right? Price points are too high and interest rates are too high. So it's very difficult to put yourself in a super cash flow heavy position on a property, right? Which, if you can't buy it low enough, actually is true, right? One thing that I would really encourage every investor to do out of the gates is to really follow 3 pillars of investing. Because if we follow these 3 pillars, what that allows us to do, it allows us to control the controllables, right? It allows us to affect the things that we have effect on, right? What are 2 things that I just mentioned that none of us can affect? We can't affect interest rates and we can't affect property prices. Those are 110% out of our control. And when we try to get upset or try to control things that we can't control, it just leads to major frustration. And people are getting frustrated right now because of property prices and interest rates. Whereas if we just focus on what we can control, we can still capitalize in this market in a really great way. So let's talk through what I would consider these 3 pillars of investing. And this is what I follow. And this is kind of what is the foundation for every property that I underwrite inside of my business on a daily basis. Number 1 is buy affordable investments, right? Buy an investment that if there's not a renter inside of that home for 4 to 6 months, that it's not going to ruin you financially, right? We can control the price point of the property that we invest. Now, sometimes that means that we might need to go to another market in order to find an affordable rental property, right? Versus, buying in Southern California, like where I live, or buying in New York, or, some parts of Florida, or wherever, right? We might need to go to another state, but it's 2023. Everything can be done from a computer. So buy a property that's affordable, right? This is protecting our long-term financial situation, right? So we don't ever put ourselves in a negative position if the property is not cash flowing for a month. So number 1, we can affect the price point in terms of are we buying a $500,000 house or are we buying a $100,000 house, right? So from day 1, buy affordable investments, right? Pillar number 2 is focus and expect to purchase a property and hold it for a minimum of 10 years. All right. Always go into a rental property with a long-term mindset. For me, my mindset's usually 15 or 20 years, but 10's the minimum, right? And, people ask, John, why? Well, it's kind of simple. Ask yourself a question. Do you know any investor who's owned a rental property for longer than 20 years or owned a property period? It didn't have to be a rental property and lost, right? Meaning they bought it 20 years ago. They held it for 20 years. They went through 1 or 2 market turns. They saw that property value go up $100,000, down $100,000, stabilize. But if they held it for 20 years in real estate, the beautiful things that happens, if we hold it long enough, we pretty much guarantee our own success, right? So if we focus on knowing that we're going to hold that property long-term, we can almost guarantee our own success. So what we've talked about so far, pillar number 1 is make sure we buy affordable investments. Pillar number 2 is buy and hold for the long-term, right? I guess I just stole that one straight up from Warren Buffett. Pillar number 3 is make sure we at least have some cash flow from day 1. We never want to put ourselves in a position where we're buying an alligator, meaning it's eating from our wallet every single month, right? We at least have some cash flow at this point in time, especially with where prices are and ultimately where interest rates are, right? And if you follow those 3 pillars, right, what'll start to fall away are the barriers that we're running into in this market right now. Barrier number 1 is price points. Price points are so high, right? Oh my God, price points are the highest they've been. I can't believe, I can't buy a house. Like these price points are so elevated. Well, if you guys remember not too long ago, probably about 12, 15 years ago, we were saying the exact same thing. The market's at the highest it will have ever been. We will never get any higher than this market ever in the history of real estate. Well, we all know that that was a lie. right? So if we come into this investment with a 15, 20-year term, guess what? Same thing's going to happen. We're going to see property values surge past where we are currently in the future, right? So we're not buying at the height of the market. We might be buying at the height of the market in this current cycle, but we're not buying at the height of the market in the future. Number two is cash flow. As long as we're cash flowing a little bit and we don't need to retire tomorrow, that cash flow is going to improve. And it's going to improve in two ways. Number one is that we will continue to increase rents, right? As the market stays as competitive it is, what'll happen is more people, as you're seeing it right now, are choosing not to buy properties because of how high the interest rates are. So what does that do? It increases the demand for rental properties, which increases the rents. Right now, we're seeing rents all across the United States increase faster than they ever have in history, right? So not only are we going to be able to increase rents year over year, which will increase ultimately our cash flow, what the second thing is going to happen is, guys, interest rates are going to come down. They're not going to be here forever. It might take 2 or 3 years to increase or to reduce our interest rates and do that refinance, right? But it's going to happen, right? And if you can suck it up with $100 a month in cash flow for 2 years and then go from an 8.5% rate down to a 5% rate, your $100 cash flow just turned into $400 a month in cash flow, right? And guess what? We've had 2 to 3 years worth of tax benefits, appreciation, debt pay down on that rental property, right? Instead of waiting for those rates to fall down, right? Because when the rates fall, guess what? Everyone who wasn't experienced in real estate investing is now jumping back into the pot, right? When everyone was scared to invest because rates were too high, we picked up all the properties we needed and just waited and benefited from the rates dropping on assets that we already owned, right? So for me, when I'm analyzing properties, guys, those are those 3 foundational pillars that I follow each and every time. And, we can, as investors, we can control those, right? And we always want to focus on what we can control and not what the market is telling us we need to do. Does that make sense, guys? And any questions on that, please ask.
No, great principles to follow, man. What part of Southern California do you live in, by the way?
I live in San Diego, which was just noted as the most expensive city in the United States. So I might need to rethink that as of the next year.
I don't live too far from you. I live in Carlsbad. Yeah.
Beautiful place.
So let's say you live in San Diego, Southern California area. What would be, let's say somebody's looking to invest in Midwest. How would you go about looking at affordable? Like what's affordable in Midwest? Are you looking at median, or in any market for that matter? Are you looking at median price? You're looking at, I don't know if you look at like A, B, C, D class neighborhood, would you go into like B minus, or would you go into D? How do you look at a new market?
Yeah. So before I ever go into a market, I'm going to do a quick analysis, right? And really, I'm going to focus on 3, maybe 4 things if I feel like I need another level of evaluation. The first thing I'm going to look at, which immediately disqualifies the state of California, is it resident friendly or is it landlord or investor friendly? Usually the easiest way to get a head start on this evaluation is it a Democratic state or is it a Republican state? Red states are just usually more investor friendly than they are resident friendly. Not to start a political conversation, but that's a good way to kind of make sure your rental properties are secure. So start there. We want to start on the state level. Hey, are we investor friendly or are we renter friendly? And then from there, we start looking at the individual cities. And the first thing I'm going to look at,
would you just automatically disqualify if it's tenant friendly, just default regardless of the numbers?
I would not. What that initial evaluation does is it allows you to at least know what you're getting into, right? One of the states that I invest in is Connecticut. It's a very blue state. They have horrendous laws for investors in terms of, having rights to your own property. So what does that mean? Well, I know that up front. I'm aware of that. I've done my research. So, I will do things like charge the absolute maximum of earnest money
deposit.
on, yeah, exactly. So deposit. So I charge 2.5 months deposit, right? So, things like that, I have my attorney write every single lease, right? So I'm very diligent on what I do up front to make sure that I don't get burned on the back end, right? Whereas in a state that's more investor friendly, then I don't need to be that secure or that thorough ultimately. So it's not a killer, but it's a good place to start.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. The next thing I'm going to look at is rent to price ratio, right? So I'm going to put myself in a position where I want to see the affordability of the homes in comparison to the amount of rent that I can actually get for that property. And I usually keep it nice and simple, right? Is I will go and look at what the average home cost is for a 3-bedroom, 1-bath property, compare it to the average rent cost for a 3-bedroom, 1-bath property, right? That allows me to easily measure what the rent to price ratio is. All right. And, the better the rent to price ratio, the more affordable the homes are for me to buy in comparison to the large amount of rents I can get from a resident that I can put in that home, right? That instantly is kind of my first, trigger on, hey, can I make some cash flow in this market, right? Can I get some real income coming in this market once rates come down, and can I get this property to cash flow from the beginning? Does that make sense?
So can you give me an example with numbers? Let's say, like, I'm just looking at my market. In Indiana, we buy 3-bedroom, 1-bath. They typically rent anywhere from like 12 to 1,500, 1,600, depending on the neighborhood. So what would you look at? Let's say if your rent is 1,300, right?
Yeah.
What
Let me pull
does
up
the mortgage know? Yeah.
I'll show you guys exactly how it works can I share my screen? This is what it's going to look like for you. All right. Price to rent ratio here. So, we'll just use this general example is, if our monthly rent on a 3-bedroom, 1-bath is a gross number of $1,000, that's $12,000 annually, right? Our average home price in that market's $125,000. That gives us a price to rent ratio of 10.4%, right? And here's kind of our ranges, right? So the higher this number is right here, right, the lower likelihood that we are going to be able to cash flow on a property in that given market, right? My market in San Diego is like way higher than 21. Whereas, I think, Shrab, what you had said, Indiana's probably going to fall in that ideal 10 to 15 range, right?
Yep.
This is where you have the most likelihood of getting really good cash flow and finding quality deals in that market. So for me, price to rent ratio is kind of my first indicator of, hey, can I cash flow in this market, right? And if the answer is yes, great. Now, the next thing that I really want to do is I want to make sure that the rent that I'm collecting, right? Because there's what are called paper returns and actual returns, guys, right? Paper returns are what these are, right? You can get $100,000 a month for a home, but can the renter actually afford that? And the way that we make sure that the renter can actually afford this is figuring out what are the economics of a given city, right? What are the drivers in that particular city that keep people employed? So the next thing I'm going to look at after I look at, red state, blue state, price to rent ratio is going to be our socioeconomic anchors, right? What are the job suppliers in that market? And I think people get really confused really quickly in terms of what an actual job supplier means, right? A job supplier is not the Home Depot or the Walmart in the town, right? It's what provides substantial economic stability to a given region or to a given city. And that would be like a Fortune 500 company. I like using Memphis, Tennessee a lot because of their socioeconomic anchors as an example. FedEx World Headquarters, right? The largest distribution and transportation airport in the world. The Mississippi River, a military base, Nike distribution plant, right? Just based on Memphis's location in the United States, pretty much everything that goes north, south, east, west in this country that's shipped stops in Memphis, Tennessee, right? So when you look at transportation and shipping, is that affected by the economy? Yes. Is it affected by the economy as badly as, let's say, tech? No. Is it affected as badly as the economy as, let's say, tourism? No, right? So we want to find these job suppliers that provide long-term stability, right? If you can find a state capital that fits within inside of these criteria, that's great. Why? Because the state capital always gets the state's money before any other city, right? And there's state jobs, there's usually military in those areas, right? Cities that are strong with colleges, education, and healthcare, right? All of those things continue to move forward when we have a struggling economy, right? Places like Scottsdale, Arizona, or Orlando, Florida, or, well, Las Vegas is kind of slowly changing through this, but Las Vegas used to be a very good example of this. Great economies, rental properties look amazing there whenever the economy's doing well, right? But what's the first thing people cut out of their expenses when they're needing to tighten their belt? And that's vacations, right? They're pulling back from that. And that's when those economies start to struggle and you really start to see failures there, right? So we go from the state level to, you know, pricing versus rents, and then to what is supporting me getting those rents on a monthly basis by looking at the socioeconomic anchors.
So when you're looking at this is great, by the way, John. When you're looking at this, let's say, the example that you gave of Memphis, how far out would you go from that, the social economic hub to buy your rental properties? Like 45 minutes, hour? Do you have any radius on how far out would you go?
Yeah, super good question. So I'll kind of give you, we'll do if you want, Shrod, I can just do a deep dive. I'll kind of show you what I look at in a city. Like I
That
can
would be
pull
great,
Memphis
man.
up and we can walk
Yeah, that
through
would
it.
be
So let's
great.
check this out.
Yeah, because I used to live in Chicago when I started investing in Indiana, and I did, I was living downtown, and I said, okay, I'm going to invest within 45 minutes to an hour of where I live, and Indiana happens to be, within 45 minutes to an hour of downtown Chicago. So I'm curious, kind of what your thoughts are on that. To how far out would you go from that socioeconomic hub?
Well, I love Indiana and I know exactly what you're talking about. So,
Are you investing in Northwest Indiana?
yeah.
Yeah, it's a great market.
So give you an idea. We'll just use yours as an example since we like it, since I like it
All right,
too.
perfect.
So Chicago, right? Illinois, the whole state's almost bankrupt and they have awful, laws for investors, right? So we want to stay on the right side of this line, which is Indiana, as you guys can see down here, right? But people that live in Chicago and Illinois understand that taxes are high, the economy's struggling, so they move over here. So now we need to say, okay, Chicago is a massive metroplex, right? Huge economy, right? Quality jobs at the end of the day. But how can we feed off of this city in a state or an area that has strong economics, right? So, you can go through here, and I'm just kind of using this as an example because I know this area pretty well, right? Anything from Gary, the whole way up to Michigan City, down to LaPorte. South Bend obviously has Notre Dame in it, right? We have Valparaiso, Crown Point, Maryville. So all of these areas right across the line, these are all LaPorte, maybe not so much, but definitely Michigan City. That's kind of a vacation spot for people from Chicago. But all this area right here is a supported economy from Chicago. So, these are all be quality places to invest that would have a strong economic foundation without all of the, bad extras that come along with an Illinois, right? And then South Bend and Elkhart are both really good college areas, right? If you want to do college rentals or get into that as well. Does that kind of answer your question there?
Yep.
Perfect.
No, that's perfect. Yeah, no, we invest in that market. We've done some deals in Michigan City, but we pretty much stay in like Northwest Indiana and like Hammond, Maryville, Crown Point area. So yeah, no, that's perfect. Like I was just curious kind of what your criteria. So, within like basically commuting distance, you would say like 1 hour, 15 minutes, just stay within the commuting distance of the major
Exactly.
metropolitan. Okay,
Yep.
cool. This is super
100%.
helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, Memphis is great too. So kind of give you an idea of how Memphis operates. For most of Memphis, Tennessee, you want to stay out of the 240/40 loop. It gets very kind of inner city in that area. You see the Memphis airport right here, which is one of the largest socioeconomic anchors. And then over here by Collierville, it's going to be the FedEx World headquarters, right? So basically anything between Memphis airport, actually anything west of the Memphis airport. So from like Graceland, the whole way over to Collierville, this is going to be all your bread and butter rental properties, right? And then from Germantown up the Bartletts, this is going to be your wealthy area of Memphis. Pretty hard to find rentals in there. And then once we get north of the city again, up between Mumford, Millington, and down here to the 40 line, all of this is Nike distribution plant, military plants, or military distribution base. All of that stuff is up north here. So anything up north again is going to be quality rental stuff. So that's usually how it works. Now, the cool thing about Memphis, the city's been growing like crazy over the last 15 years. Mississippi is now a suburb of Memphis, Tennessee as well too. As you can see, basically the Metroplex has just run down here into Mississippi. So South Haven, Horn Lake, Lynchburg, I would consider all of this a suburb of Memphis, Tennessee. Everybody lives down here, works in Memphis. So also another really quality place to invest, even though it's in a different state, kind of like what you were doing in Indiana.
Oh, awesome, man. No, this is super helpful.
Absolutely. What other questions you guys got? Keep them coming. I like this.
And John, I'm curious, when you're investing, are you strictly looking at numbers? For example, going back to Indiana, like Gary is going to give you much better numbers, but it's not the best neighborhood to live in, right?
Yep.
Are you looking at the certain percentage of people living in that area be homeowners, or are you okay investing in an area that's like basically flooded with rental properties? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is a great kind of great segue because we've gone state, city. Now let's talk about neighborhoods, right? So, so many investors kind of try, and this is my own personal opinion, so, take it for what it's worth. So many investors try to like label neighborhoods A, B, C, D, whatever, right? And, I don't really like that because my C probably doesn't match your C, and, we're probably not talking the same language. So what I try to do is, just look at a neighborhood from the standpoint of, especially when we're getting into these better price markets, right? Because if you look at San Diego, half of the people in some of the nicest neighborhoods in San Diego, people rent, right? So like for San Diego, it's really hard to determine, is it a good neighborhood because of renters, right? Because, you can still make $250,000 in San Diego and need to rent your place. When we get to places like Gary or, LaPorte or what have you, that mindset as well as that dichotomy changes, right? The more owner occupants in a neighborhood, the higher pride of ownership you're going to have and the more likelihood of stability long-term in those neighborhoods. So for me personally, I try to invest in neighborhoods that are owner occupied, meaning they're at least 50% owner occupied. But I also don't want you to overthink it. So I use a website called neighborhoodscout.com, and I'll pull that up for you guys right now. We can check that out. So neighborhoodscout.com, you can buy, I just use the free version. You can buy like a subscription for $100 a year, and, it gives you way better analytics, but I don't think you need analytics just because I just want the generalities. Too much analytics causes me to not make decisions, and I like making decisions. So, just type in Memphis, Tennessee. All right. A few things that I don't look at that are probably going to blow your mind. I don't look at schools, and I don't look at crime. And you'll be like, well, John, why don't you look at either of those? Well, crime is a lagging indicator in a lot of cases. I think you'd be surprised at how much crime actually happens in your neighborhood that you are unaware of, if you actually paid attention to the crime in your neighborhood and compared it to other places around the country, you'd probably be like, oh shit, there's way more crime in my neighborhood than I knew. So I think it's a lagging indicator. And I think that we're kind of numb to what real crime actually is. And then number two, schools. The average blue collar individual that's going to be renting our home is not worried about the school district that their children go to. They're worried about how close they are to work, right? Let's say that again. The average blue collar individual that's going to be renting the home that we're going to be providing for them is more worried about how close and easy it is for them to get to work than the school district their children go to. And you're thinking, John, how is that possible? Well, we need to put ourselves in our renters' minds, right? We are not renters, right? We are investors. We are in this position for a reason. We have this mindset for a reason, right? This is not the same mindset as our residents that are living in our home. So we want to supply them with a property that is closer to work than it is in a good school district. Now, if it winds up being both, great. But I would rather it be closer to all of the socio-economic anchors in my city than a good school district. So I don't look at crime in school. I like this overview. This overview can tell me 95% of everything that I need to know. All right. And let's check this out. All right. So what did I tell you guys earlier? I told you inside of the 4240 circle, it gets pretty ugly, right? There is a strip that runs like down the middle that's really nice. But, look at this. This is all like the lowest. If you look over here, it says...
This is for crime? The color coding is for crime, or what is it?
So I'm on the overview tab right here. And then if you go to...
What's the deep red versus yellow?
Most expensive Memphis neighborhoods. All right. And then
so
this,
the pricing.
Tell us the highest and lowest. So what this is saying is all this dark brown, these are the most expensive neighborhoods in Memphis. So that's, the rich areas, right? Probably not buying rental properties there. These really light yellow areas, which is right inside that 4240 circle I was telling you about, the lowest, right? That's going to be the urban core, which is the PC way to say it. And then I probably want to be somewhere right here, right? I want to be, as I talked about, the southern part of Memphis is our bread and butter, right? These are the areas that are going to have most of our renter, kind of our even renter slash owner occupant neighborhoods, right? The brown are all owner occupants. The really light yellow are all rentals. And then everything in the middle is going to be that 50-50 split, right? I can normally make my decision on where I want to invest in the city by just looking at this map. And then what I'll do is as I start looking at rental properties, if I don't know this city that well, or, this is someplace I've never invested before, then I'll just start calling real estate agents in that area and start having conversation with them. Hey, I'm looking at this property on 123 Main Street. It's in this zip code. What are your thoughts on that area as a rental property? Would you go there in the middle of the day and get out of your car and collect rent, right? Would you have a problem walking down that street in the middle of the night, right? I would start asking those questions. So this allows me to just quickly and easily make an evaluation. Now we can go deeper, right? We can talk about economics and demographics, right? What this will help us do is this will help to show us, is there any type of gentrification going on, right? I mean, you see in South Memphis here, we're seeing some gentrification, big income increases across the southern part of Memphis, right? Which is great. We like seeing that. And then, this is just highest appreciating neighborhoods in Memphis as well. Guess what? It's amazing when you see all these things start to line up, right? We had highest income increases in southern Memphis, and that was 100% correlated by the highest appreciating neighborhoods in Memphis, because people are moving into Memphis. Other neighborhoods are getting more expensive, so they're looking for these transitional neighborhoods. They're going through gentrification. So the southern Memphis area I've made my decision. That's where I'm investing, right? Don't overthink it, right? We have the ability to make quality decisions with how easy it is to get our hands on data like this. Just look at it, make a decision, move on. Then once you have a property that you're making an offer on or something under contract, then do your next level of due diligence and say, hey, call that agent, talk to another investor, or so on and so forth. So that's ultimately my quote unquote neighborhood searching process, if you will.
I think that's such a great way to look at the neighborhood, looking at appreciation, income, and if someone wants to look into school and crime also, they can do that.
Yep.
And what are your thoughts on, you're in several different markets, so someone starting out, what are your thoughts on like, going deeper into a market versus like diversifying across multiple markets? Let's say if I'm looking in, like my goal is to buy 3 or 4 properties next year, right? Would
Yeah.
you tell a newbie investor, someone starting out, to, hey, just buy all 3 or 4 properties in the one neighborhood that you feel comfortable with, or spread them across like a couple of different markets?
Yeah, great question. I've heard, so many investors like in passing say, "Oh, I don't want to put too much faith or too much of my portfolio in one city," right? And if you sit down and think about that for a second, like how many houses and how many people live in an individual city, you would need to own like millions of houses in order to overplay your stay in one
Right.
city. And as a newer investor, don't overcomplicate things, right? You're going to have to, if this market isn't your backyard, and maybe even if it is, you're going to have to set up relationships with property management teams, leasing agents, a contractor, a handyman, or, what have you, a lender, an insurance agent. So, you don't need to do this for 4 or 5 markets right out of the gate, right? Pick a city, find your neighborhoods, and spend the next 10 years building a great portfolio in that city, right? The only reason why I would ever encourage you to change is like, I'll give you a perfect example. Probably 13 years ago, I was buying houses in Dallas, Texas. All right. Great market at that point in time. I was paying $700 a year in property taxes. I was paying $100,000 for houses. Life was great. And then all of a sudden, Dallas decided to explode, right? And I went from paying $700 a year in property taxes to $4,500 a year in property taxes. Instead of for $100,000 houses, they were $300 houses, $300,000 houses. So my ability to invest in that market dissolved, right? So, I kept the portfolio I had and I moved on to a different market. Other than that, if your demographics and your cash flow and all of the things stay consistent, don't leave, right? There's no reason to cause more work than you need.
I think I agree. It makes sense to just double down on a market, and then you start leveraging some of the relationships that you're building in
Yep.
that market.
Yeah.
If
It's
you
a
have like
domino
one
effect,
prop,
right?
yeah,
The more
agree.
relationships you create in a single market, the more opportunities or at bats you're going to have to buy more property. So,
Right.
just keep it going.
There's a question in the chat if you want to take that from Avery.
Tampa, Florida. All right. New to wholesaling and have been at it for 3 months cold calling, but haven't ran across a deal yet. Do you think I should switch markets and get into a lower average home price and possibly a less dense area? Also, when scrubbing my list, I'm looking for 35% equity, built before 1985, and 10 years of ownership. Do you agree with that criteria? I'm waiting on 10 deals. So, great question, Avery. 3 months, I haven't ran across a deal yet. 3 months of cold calling. I mean, obviously, I don't know how many people you're reaching out to on a daily basis. I feel like you've definitely put a decent amount of time into that market. I don't know a huge amount about Tampa, but what I tell a lot of my new students is give yourself, go wide until you get that first property, then go deep, right? Because until you've committed to a property, right, you can go as wide as you want. Look at a couple markets, evaluate a couple markets, and then once you have that first property, right, then you focus on that market and go deep. So if you know another market and you feel comfortable with another market, it probably is not going to hurt to kind of go a little bit wider in your search, because all that's going to do is just provide you more opportunity to potentially get a deal. And then built before 1985 and over 10 years of ownership. So yeah, I mean, that criteria for your cold calling list, 35% equity, built before 1985 and over 10 years of ownership, that works for me. Personally, I don't do a whole lot of cold outreach any longer. We do a lot of marketing, inbound marketing. So I don't know the last time that we did cold calling on a list and what our criteria was, but it still works. And I know people that have a boatload of success on it. So I would say keep that criteria and just maybe go a little bit wider in your market search.
Cool. And then what marketing are you doing, John, for your for buying your rental properties?
Yeah. So, all of the marketing that I do is kind of, it brings in rental properties, it brings in wholesale deals, it brings in rehab. So we do TV commercials, we do PPC, pay-per-click ads on Google. We do Facebook ads. We do direct mail. And we also do PPL, or pay per lead, which we buy leads from a specific, they're basically PPC ads, just done by a third party as well too.
Like,
so
need to
those
sell
are,
my house fast, and there's some other
you got it.
companies out
Exactly.
there.
Yep. You got it. Yep.
Okay.
So we do all that. I think that's it. Yep. That's it.
And for someone new starting out, for inbound leads, like incoming marketing, is there one that you recommend, like, that they should start out with? Like, TV and radio are going to be expensive for someone new starting out. I'm curious, kind of someone with, Avery mentioned in the message with the 10 DLC, A2P 10 DLC regulation. So that's affecting kind of how investors are able to, reach out to homeowners with, cold outreach and stuff. And we're also noticing that's totally starting to affect calling also. So I'm curious kind of what your thoughts are on inbound marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. So for a new investor starting out, the first question I'm always going to ask is, if you're going to generate inbound leads, do you have the ability to connect with those inbound leads within 5 minutes of them hitting your inbox, right? If the answer is no, then I say focus on only outbound leads, because inbound leads are worthless if you don't have speed to lead. If you're getting a pay per lead or a PPC lead or a Facebook lead or something like that coming in the door, and you're not calling them within 5 minutes, and I'm talking like double dialing, leaving a voicemail, sending a text message, like blowing up their phone, you're just burning through cash. If you have the ability to touch the lead within 5 minutes of it coming in, then the easiest place to start is a pay per lead service, something like needtosellyourhomesfast.com, right? Where you can literally log on, set your budget, get leads sent to your email inbox. And if the lead is a bad lead, guess what? You get a refund and you get another lead, right? So that's the easiest way to do it, like with no brain thought. Another good way to bring in leads, if you're willing to do a little bit more work, is PPC and Facebook leads. They're pretty darn affordable. And if you have a really good service provider to do your PPC and Facebook marketing, they're affordable and they're very, very consistent. You just got to have that ability to do speed to lead.
Thank you. Mia has a great question. I'm curious to, who's the first set of people you look for to get into a new market? Lenders, property managers, contractors. Great question.
Yeah. If you're a newer investor and you're going into a new market, I always tell my students is take the step that's directly in front of you, right? Newer investors get so wrapped up in this process of, I need a lender and I need a contractor and I need a property inspector and I need property manager. I need all of these 19,000 things, right? Whether, even though we might not need that property manager for 6 or 8 months down the road, for some reason, our brain tells us we need them now, right? So take the first step that's in front of you. And that's the only step you ever take. And that's the only as far as you think, right? So for example, if I'm going to look in a market and I need to understand neighborhoods once I have a property under contract, well, technically the first place I'm going to look if I'm buying a rental property is I'm going to find wholesalers, because I want them to send me deals on properties if I'm not doing any of my own marketing. Once I look at wholesalers and I start to see properties that I like and I start making offers and I start putting properties under contract, then I'm going to talk to an agent. And then the next step is then I need to talk to a property inspector, right? And then the next step is I need to talk to a lender, right? So just take the next step that's in front of you in the process. Don't feel like you need to have a Rolodex of 42 different people in that market in order to be successful, right? Just one step at a time. We're going to eat this elephant one bite at a time.
A great answer. Yeah, makes sense. I mean, you're right. I remember when I first started investing, I got overwhelmed with all different people that I needed to know. Like I hadn't even started looking at the neighborhood, and I was thinking about having a property manager lined up to start managing the properties. Like I don't even need this person for like at least 6 months, when I'm starting the process. So it's good to just look at one step at a time.
Yeah. And it's our brain making excuses to not take action, right? I tell my students, I say, your first job is to get a property under contract, because what would normally take you 6 to 8 months, you will get done in 30 days when you have a property under contract and have to close on 30 days, right? Like your back gets put against the wall. Yep. Time to go.
Yeah. Great. What are your top 3 markets to invest in right now for you?
Yeah. So for me right now, Arkansas, Little Rock specifically, Memphis, Tennessee. And then, this is going to sound odd to everyone, but my main market that I do like active investing, wholesaling, and rehabbing is Connecticut, the entire state. So we do a lot of wholesaling and flipping in Connecticut, and we still buy rental properties there, even though it's not the best investor-friendly market, if you will. But we buy rental properties there because, deals just come across our desk. We can't sit aside.
How come Connecticut? I'm just curious. From Southern California to Connecticut.
I know, right? Well, I grew up on the East Coast in Pennsylvania,
okay.
And I have family back there. Yeah.
Cool. Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool. Guys, any other thoughts on Ohio? Patrick is asking. Patrick Kane.
Thoughts on Ohio? Great. I was a big Ohio hater for a very long time. Because Ohio had this weird demographic. It looked great on paper as a rental market in terms of price points, in terms of the amount of rent you could get, but there was never any financial backing to any of those numbers, right? I mean, if a basketball player can leave a basketball team and destroy a city financially, there's problems in that city, right? And I'm talking LeBron James in Cleveland, right? But, places like Columbus and Cincinnati and Cleveland, they've created a lot of really good legislation to move jobs into those cities. So they are, I would say at this point in time, they're pretty quality rental markets.
John, if you have people on this call and then other people on an email list that we send it out to, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
The best way to get in touch with me is just you can send me an email. It's super simple. It's John, JOHN at rentalproppro.com. I'll just throw that into chat right now so you guys have it, and I'll also share with you my Instagram as well, so you guys can follow me. I do daily rental property tips and tricks and help with Instagram. So lots of really good stuff on there.
All right, a couple of questions.
Yeah,
One from
let's
David.
hit these up.
When working with new investors, how do you vet the work that they have done?
David, when you say vet the work that they have done, meaning the investors' work that's they've put into find a property, or are you talking about contractors work? If you just add some clarity to that, that'd be great. How to check for their credibility.
Yeah, like when you're working in a virtual market, you want to, work with an investor in that virtual market, in that market. How do you check for their credibility?
Oh, yeah, great question. So I don't take anybody ever at face value, especially when we're moving into a new market. So I'll give you an example, right? Every property that's ever sent to me, I pull my own comps. Every property that I ever buy, I've done a full property inspection on, right? Every contractor that I've ever hired during the first half a dozen to dozen construction project they work with me on, I do weekly property inspections. That's that property inspector that did the initial property inspection. I pay him $100 a week to go out to the house, do a walkthrough and say, hey, my contractor told me he did this, this, and this. Did he do that? And what's the quality of the work done? So I always have a third party with eyes on a project to make sure, I don't wind up, having issues. Now, have I had issues? Absolutely. The system's not perfect, but I'm always going to do what I call inspect what I expect at all times to make sure that's, they're doing what they say they're doing, essentially.
All right.
Who are you using for that aren't charging you an arm and a leg? Tyson. The first thing that I always do whenever I have a finished product in a city in terms of like a finished rental property, Tyson, is I always go to local banks, right? And I'm talking like local hometown, have 1 to 3 branches. I'm always looking at local banks. Those local banks lend and service their own debt, right? Which means they don't have to follow all the same rules as larger banks. They don't have a huge board of directors to make happy. So normally those local banks are going to be your ticket to getting great refinance deals on properties. Now, interest rates suck, period, end of story. So, no one's going to show up with a 4% interest rate today, but at least you're going to get better fees and better service with a local lender.
All right. And then what about novation agreements? Should I find an attorney for this, or will it be easy to find a title company that has done these before and have them provide a template? I've never done a novation, so what your experience is with that?
Yeah, we do novations. That market's definitely cooling with, properties sitting on the market a little bit longer. We still do a lot of wholesales, but on the novation side of things, there's 2 or 3, I think Eric Brewer, I believe his name is.
Right.
He's like the novation king. He's probably been on this podcast before. I think he gives his contracts away for free on his website. So
he's coming on a call this month. Yeah. We have him scheduled for this call this month.
Yeah, he gives his contracts away for free. So you can just, I think my team just uses them, if I'm being honest.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, John. Yeah, it's pretty much top of the hour. Thank you so much for sharing this, man. Like some really practical advice that you shared there. I love like the neighborhood scout and just looking at, different criteria. So very insightful. And guys, John shared his email and Instagram. So yeah, it's a link if you want to click on the Instagram link and just share him. And he's sharing a lot of information on Instagram.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. And, just don't overthink it. This process, people kind of put rental property investing on this pedestal of it's difficult, or, the numbers are more difficult than they need to be. If you guys can go out there and negotiate with sellers and do all this crazy stuff that you're doing right now, starting a real estate investment business, rental properties on that totem pole in terms of difficulty is very low. So, make it, part of your, monthly, quarterly, annually business planning to add that rental property and that investment piece in, because in 5 or 6 or 7 years, you're going to thank yourself for that. And, I always tell my students is don't try to, think about being like, or don't try to be an overachiever, because trying to be an overachiever usually disappoints you. And what I mean by that is, as humans, we overestimate what we can do in 1 year and we underestimate what we can do in 5, right? So if you can commit yourself to buying one rental property every single quarter, right? That's 4 properties a year. That's 20 properties in 5 years. You own more real estate than 99.9% of the people on the planet, right? Just by doing that. And 90 days, that's probably, you need to spend maybe 4 or 5 hours a week, looking at properties to get that rental property, right? So, set goals like that for yourself to allow yourself to have small victories and not think that you need to build a 60 property portfolio in 12 months. I promise you, in 5 years, if you own 20 rental properties, you'll be a very, very happy camper.
Yeah, absolutely. One last question, Sean. Are you using VAs for any of the inbound leads?
No VAs for
No
inbound leads. I mean, I have VAs inside of my business that do reporting and KPI tracking and list stacking and all that stuff. But one thing I've learned about, and this is different in every market, but in the Northeast, in Connecticut, if someone calls into the office, they want someone from here to pick up that phone. It's a very interesting mindset in the Northeast. It's just who they are, and we just have to abide by it. So we don't have any VAs picking up the phone for us. That's how we lay it out.
All right. Thank you, John.
Yep.
Great
Absolutely,
information.
guys.
Thank
Hopefully
you.
this was helpful, and it was awesome seeing all you guys. Thanks for having me on, and have a great rest of the week.
Thank you, John. Thank you, guys.
Yep.
Have a great week.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.